everybody. Greg Lake with the TheoConnect.com podcast. I have a special episode that I'm real excited about today. We are with Robert Oliver, who is the resident scholar and historian at All Tribes Medicine Assembly, based out of Austin, Texas. And today he's going to come and explain to us their upcoming event, which is meant to mimic, to a certain degree at least, the Eleusinian Mysteries. So, Robert, thank you for coming on.
Greg, it's my pleasure. Absolutely, man.
And for clarification, I've worked with ATMA probably at least over the last year or so. So very familiar with the church and everything there. And Robert, again, as I said, who is working with and a partner in the All Tribes Medicine Assembly. They have decided to try and recreate, again, to the degree that they can, the Eleusinian Mysteries. So I'm going to hand it over to Robert. Robert, I guess just, give us some lead up into kind of how, as a group, y'all's mind started flowing in this direction. And then we'll talk kind of at the back end about what the vision is for what y'all are going to be holding.
Well, I really started out with looking at the need to be all inclusive, yet having a way or a ritual that can approach the sacred. Mm-hmm. So the thing is there's a need in our society to have sacred rituals. Mm-hmm. And sacred rituals, in my mind, are very different than, taking drugs recreationally, and are also very different of what we see a lot in the medicine space is the self-help healing aspect of going into your own trauma. There seems to be a third need for ecstatic events that are really about discovering something greater than you. And so a lot of people want to shove that within the religious category, or they want to go say that's spiritual, or they even want to just call it energy or an artificial intelligence algorithm that we're tuning into. I prefer to just keep it as sacred because we're open to all of those ideas. And that is the second thing with ATMA, is because we're an All Tribes Medicine Assembly, we're trying to come up with a theology or a teaching that is inclusive of everyone's religion. And that's where then I think the Eleusinian Mysteries stood out, because the Eleusinian Mysteries started at about 2000 BC, even before Greece was Greece.
Yep.
Okay. But they were already there. There was a cave, there was a spring, and there was early agricultural societies that were practicing certain types of divination there. And then those mysteries lasted 2,400 years until 400 BC. AD. And what that means is that that's a span that's larger than the Catholic Church. Mm-hmm. It's a span that touched upon the Vedas in India, while those were being written, also had influence across the Mediterranean with Egypt. And it predated really Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. Mm-hmm. So when I was thinking about reenacting a ritual, this one stood out, not only because of its, lifespan, mm-hmm. but also the fact that it was kind of paleo. It was the Western original mother of rituals that then got adopted, if you read Brian Muraresku's book, The Immortality Key, mm-hmm. into Christianity. It flirted with Judaism. Elements of it in the poetry of Rumi and the early Sufis. You can just see the correlations. And that to me immediately said, okay, so this is something that we can do that doesn't necessarily check the box of religion, because it became before most monotheistic religions actually came on the planet. And then the second part is it's deeply Western. It's deeply us. I mean, we use so many Greek words in our language. And so that was really the origin. Plus, I already mentioned before the work from Brian Muraresku, the Immortality Key. I mean, when I'm reading it and I'm seeing what these, what was going on at that time, I'm like, I want to do this. I really want to do something like this. And why aren't we doing something like this? So, what started as a hobby and a passion project, became discussions. And then what became discussions became meetings and gatherings and saying, hey, let's do this. And, and when should we do it? Oh, the fall equinox coming right around the corner. Boom. Okay, let's do it,
yeah,
guys.
yeah. Do we know, or and just kind of on that point, do we know from the and I've read Brian Marescu's book. I just finished, as a matter of fact. I loved it. Do we know, and I know he probably talked about this in there, but at what time of the season were the mysteries usually conducted, or was it done a few times a year? I can't remember. If you could just kind of refresh us
Yeah.
on.
So you could only be an initiate once. And so the initiates, you could go and attend the ceremony later, but the initiates had a really heavy program. In the springtime, there was what's called a small mystery. And in my best understanding of it, through, of course, a modern day lens, if that looked like something that was more akin to like, hey, let's have an ego death. Let's get the person in spring to go through some sort of ritual, but it wasn't visual.
Okay.
It wasn't LSD like or mushroom like, but it seems that have to been deeply, impactful. And then the big mystery was done right at fall in September with the fall equinox. And what that means is that there was also 6 months of integration there.
Okay.
So, you're really, again, to give this a modern lens, right?
Yeah.
You're starting to notice that, so the small mystery was done in springtime, and then the actual mystery was done in the fall. And if you were an initiate, you had to do the small mystery. And then in the fall, it started with a 16-mile pilgrimage from Athens all the way to Eleusis. And then the day of the actual mystery event, which was on the fall equinox, you would fast, and you wouldn't break the fast until the Hierophant or high priestess gave you the magic kuykeon potion. And so there was things that the initiates did that other people didn't have to do. They were blindfolded. It was a really, really big deal. And also their ticket to admission was about a 1 month salary. So this was a once in a lifetime event, held once a year with a 6 month preparation. It was taken very seriously. It wasn't seen as, it wasn't seen as another agriculturally related harvest celebration. It was deep to that. And then here's the crazy thing, right? And when they were doing this at the height of Eleusis, sometimes they were doing it 3,000 people at once.
Wow.
3,000 initiates doing a pilgrimage, doing a fast, drinking a psychoactive potion in a specially built building called the Telesterion that was not like any other temple. It had no windows. It was dark, and it was lit by candles. I mean, talk about a profound, we don't have anything like that today.
No, you're right. I mean, obviously plant medicines and theogens are kind of making their way, throughout society. But, the way I kind of see this is more of a little bit more formalized and structured in a good way, though. You know what I mean? And that kind of goes to my next question. So we have some details about possibly the inner workings of the ceremony. Have y'all kind of worked to fill those gaps to the best of your ability, or how do y'all deal with certain areas of the mysteries that we might not be aware of exactly how they were conducted?
Ooh. You're gonna give me chills. You're gonna give me chills. So what has been happening is I've been holding info sessions where I've been inviting people here in Austin to come listen and learn about the mysteries. But it's also a moment for me to learn about what people think about the mysteries. And what I'm seeing is I'm seeing two camps of really interesting people. The first one, absolutely, they've read Brian Muraresku's book or met Carl Ruck's Road to Eleusis, and they have some type of understanding of, the classicist story of Eleusis, and they are absolutely fascinated by that. And I love meeting those people because there's just this endless conversation of what could it be. But that doesn't tell you what it is yet. That just tells you what we all kind of have read from different sources and what we kind of paste together. But then there is a second group of people that are in the medicine community that are highly spiritual or empathic or have some type of psychic ability that are also drawn to an Eleusis event. And it's very, very different. And they are talking that they have been able to see themselves as either a priestess in Eleusis in a past life, that they feel a calling to come do it, that there is something within them that is already revealing itself about it. So when I meet these people, I get chills.
Wow.
Because I am literally, I kind of feel like, from a religious aspect, I don't feel like this is my ceremony. One, I'm a male, cannot
That's right.
claim the Eleusinian Mysteries as part of my lineage or sex. Anyone that really seriously partook within the Eleusinian Mysteries was female or castrated. And they were very serious about that. And I think there's a reason for that. So to get women in the community that have some type of deep intuitive ability come up and say, I am called to do this. I want to partake. I have had visions about Eleusis from the day that I came to Austin.
Wow.
And so when that happens, you go, okay. And then, one of the things that we're doing at the end of the month is we're getting a group of highly intuitive women together.
Wow.
And we will be praying to Demeter, Persephone, even Hades, to come back and tell us what to do. So not only is this a historical reenactment, it's also looking at and saying, look, if these, if there is a lineage there within the spiritual realm, then the words Demeter, Persephone, Hades, Zeus, Aphrodite, and if we call upon them and seek guidance within meditation or within some sort of trance, maybe things will be revealed in order for us to incorporate and take into this type of ritual and ceremony. That was not something I was planning that we would be doing. I was going to be sticking to the historical acts, but there's so much about the mysteries that is not known, that is secret, and was punishable by death to reveal its secret that, 2,000 years later, 1,600 years later, we cannot expect to have that knowledge, written down. But yet there is something alive there that truly surprised me and fascinates me.
Nice. Yeah, no, I love to hear that. I've often thought, as more historical evidence comes out that really these types of practices existed, all over the ancient world, but that we don't have specific knowledge of what certain groups in the past did with these. My thought's always been that the sacrament through proper prayer and meditation will come and inform us, on best practices or how this was done. Kind of bleeds into my next question. So obviously I don't think there's much debate amongst scholars that in fact the kuykeon, what was ingested at the mysteries, is indeed some type of entheogenic concoction. But now I do understand that there is some disagreement, respectful disagreement amongst scholars on exactly what that potion was. How
Mhm.
are y'all addressing that in this? And have y'all made a like kind of a final decision on exactly what the sacrament will be here?
So we have not made a final decision.
Okay.
It's partially because I'm also wanting to kind of wait to have a discussion with Brian Muraresku at the end of August.
Okay.
However, we have reached out to various brewers, so it will be a beer-like substance.
Okay.
It will be piped, but there's some really interesting aspects when it comes to the chemistry that are not always evident.
Mm-hmm.
There's also three acts within the mysteries, and the first act, you know, was heavy, and it seems to also almost have a near-death kind of experience
Yep.
aspect to it.
Yep. Yep.
Uh, it's kind of some, there's a hypothesis that this was, the rape or the taking of Persephone to the underworld, the rape by Hades. So these are not mild of heart subjects.
Yeah.
And were these reenacted, were these seen within the medicine space, or were they, for example, if ergot was used? And let's talk a little bit about ergot
Yeah.
here,
Yeah.
because ergot is the main contender of what was in this kuykeon.
Mm-hmm.
So the kuykeon was the magical potion that was given by the Hierophant to the initiate, okay? And at the point, he was blindfolded when he receives it, and from that comes two qualities that we know.
Mm-hmm.
One of it invoked images to where they would say that they would see Persephone come from the underworld, brighten up this dark, dark, dark room, and then go back into the underworld eventually. Even one of the philosophers who was blind and was an initiate at the mysteries. He was blind from birth, had never seen anything in his life, was able to see. So that type of scholarly evidence is
Mm-hmm.
telling us, even at John Hopkins, they're seeing, the ability for blind people to be able to see on an acid trip or something of that nature. So even though they've never seen anything in their life, they will have visual experience within the psychedelic realm. So that tells us that obviously this wasn't alcohol.
Yes.
And that's a really important point. But then the other sense that's really important, I think, comes from Plato, is there's a real noetics to it. And just to explain the word noetic, it means that it was realer than real.
Yeah.
So this did not come across as a hallucination or something made up by the mind. This came across as something very real and sometimes realer than what we perceive on a daily basis in our own lives.
Mm-hmm.
So those two aspects, the visual and the noetic of it, give us kind of a hint of what could be going on. But there's also the first act that kind of had a near death, or it was harsh.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing is that what we do know for 100% certain is that the Greeks used a mixed potion. It is not just a single. And so there could have been an ingredient in there because they were using hemlock and membrane and all of these things that could have also had a really heavy purging effect.
Okay.
Kind of like ayahuasca can do.
Mm-hmm.
But it didn't last. And then you see something that lasted all night, which then kind of gets you to the aspect of, this sounds more like LSD.
Yeah.
And so to go back to the history of LSD here for a second, is Donald Hoffman in the 1960s, 1930s, the
Mm-hmm.
1960s obviously revived the use of LSD quite vividly. But in the 1930s, in about 1938, Hoffman was studying the alkaloids of a fungal smut that grows on barley and rye called ergot.
Mm-hmm.
Ergot is very known to kind of taint the beers in ways that are not desirable.
Yeah.
And so for brewers, they avoid it. But there's been vital medicine that especially that was derived from these alkaloids that are produced by this fungus.
Hmm.
Some of these medicines are used still today to stop the bleeding with childbirth
Hmm.
for women. And so that's really what Hoffman was studying, is he was looking at certain things to help with the entire childbirth rearing. And that could be a chemical that could be then, isolated, studied, and basically sold as a pharmaceutical.
Hmm.
Um, he also discovered LSD 25 at that point. Well, he synthesized it, but then didn't discover it until his Magic Bicycle ride, which was about
Yeah.
5 or 6 years later. And so he's working with the same fungus that would have been growing in the fields all surrounding Eleusis.
Okay.
And so I think that there can be there could be an LSD, um, what would you say, continuum hypothesis
Hmm.
here, that the fungus that was growing on the fields was being cultivated by the women that were, that held the secrets to the mysteries of Eleusis.
Yeah.
And there's lots of fields there, and also Demeter was the goddess of agriculture. And so the fact that they were tending the fields, they were cultivating things, they were brewing the beer, they were proportioning, sizing, and serving, you know, a mixed potion that was basically a beer that could have been ergotized. And this notion of ergotized beer is not unique in history.
Hmm.
There was a scholar that basically saw the same thing during the Middle Ages, is that where witch trials were coming in, there was pretty wet seasons.
Hmm.
And also think about the entire Salem witch project here in the
Yeah.
United States, that there could have been ergotized poisoning going on within the population. And obviously today, with modern food safety and with the fact that we get our food globally, this is no longer a concern that we're going to eat something that has molded and then give us an incredible unexpected trip,
Yeah.
right? But back in those days, they probably knew exactly what that was. And so I feel very comfortable with LSD, but I do not believe that LSD was easily synthesized in its purest form. And
Yeah.
I do think that there was other ingredients, could have been opiates, could have been other aspects. And some of the alkaloids with LSD can have very sickening effects.
Hmm.
And so if they're not synthesized out, and remember, they did not have distillation back
Yeah.
in those days, that could account for the violent uh, embodiment feelings that
Yeah.
were in the first act. So, you know, but they were synthesizing it probably very, very strongly in high potencies, but not with the lab purity that we have today.
Yeah.
But you
Yeah.
don't need a lot of LSD. You're talking milligrams here.
Yeah. Yeah. No, and so yeah, that's very interesting, and I kind of like this concept that y'all haven't really squared it down yet, but I guess just kind of let the spirit guide you in the right direction, more or less. Yeah. So my next question is this, and again, for security reasons, you don't have to give an exact location, but if have y'all chosen a location, and is it kind of based off what we believed was similar to the historical Eleusinian mysteries, or how have y'all kind of reconciled that?
We're exploring two caves in Texas right
Okay.
now.
Okay.
Just because the location's not set, I'm also not
Yeah.
going to disclose it. And plus, in order to attend, you have to attend one of my info sessions.
Okay. And I'll just real
Because
quick,
there's a culture of conflict here.
and I'll put your contact information in case anyone who sees this might be interested to contact you.
Absolutely.
Okay. Perfect.
And then, Instagram at ATMA Church is
Okay.
a great way to go.
Sweet. So location wise, y'all really haven't pinned it down, but y'all are trying to, you say, like
So,
with a cave, like a
so
cave system.
location wise, this first ritual is going to be very small.
Okay.
We haven't been able to do a small mystery.
Okay.
So we weren't able in spring to literally get people to go through a non-visual ego death with then integration appropriately. So the small mystery was not accomplished this year, but will be done there.
Okay.
But this year we'll be doing the pilgrimage. We will be doing the fast, a bathing in a spring, and then the nightly ritual within a cave.
Okay.
And the reason that the cave is, I think, an important ingredient is we do have a small group, so we have flexibility there. But what's really, really interesting about the cave dynamics that I love to point out is a lot of people have medicine experience going through grand events with thousands of people there. Example is the Grateful Dead concert, right?
Yeah, surely.
But what you see with a Grateful Dead concert is that the stage orchestrates the show. You know,
Yes.
what the musicians and the lighting technicians are putting forth, then the sound engineers is exactly is planned months in advance. There is
Yes.
some improv, obviously, with some guitar solos and
Yep.
you know, sometimes some really natural jam sessions come out. And so, you know, we were like, initially our reaction was, you know, let's do a medicine event like every other medicine event, and let's get some really good music and some, and that's exactly what we do when we go to ceremony, right? And we said no. We said, no, we're not going to do that, because there's a line within the Eleusinian Mysteries that actually there's accounting records left
Oh, wow.
from Eleusis. And these accounting records, obviously, they don't divulge the total mystery. But what is interesting is the Greeks invented tragedy and comedy. You know, stage play was their profession. Yet there was no budget for actors or stages or props.
Okay.
And also realizing that a blind philosopher could see the show, right, tells me that this, and then the way that the telesterion in Eleusis was constructed, this was a darkness ritual. This was a sober ritual that was basically the only thing that was lighting the place was embers, you know, kind of walkways and guides, but there was no real, you know, there was a chimney, but it let in no light. So there was ventilation because there was 3,000 people inside of a square building, but there was still. So we've decided from a historical aspect not to have lasers, not to have, you know, big light shows, but there were some ingredients that were there historically. Specifically gong. Can you imagine a gong in the dark? And then the women would chant, the hierophants would chant. And in a way, I think that chanting is on purpose. It not only probably sounded beautiful, but it was also channeling. In other words, as the spirit, you know, filled the room, the chanting changed, then the chanting changes, and then, you know, the participants, you know, collective imagining starts changing, and you get this dialectic unfolding between the chanting and the imagination within everybody. And see, when an image in the medicine space emerges from within a collective group, that's something we don't see a lot. You know, people go do ayahuasca and they have a very introspective experience. And then we go to a concert and we have a very collective experience, but it's orchestrated. So the thing that we're really trying to conduct with the mysteries is to get this collective imagining going. And so that's why I think, you know, the pilgrimage, the fast, you know, the psychedelic potion, and then the channeling with very basic instrumentation, even though the Greeks were not basic in their ability to pull off a stage, okay? That tells me that this is really sacred worship. This is really the coming together of a collective body, and sometimes the first time in their life that they're ever experiencing this, to come together and then literally look at something higher up God, transformative.
Mm.
And that's what I think is so important about these Eleusinian mysteries.
Wow. Yeah, and so one thing, in Brian Marescu's book, the thing about the mysteries everyone says, you die before you die. And that through that process, you gain this ultimate perspective on really, I would assume, kind of why we're here, what we're doing. So I guess the ultimate goal for y'all is to kind of recreate that type of experience. And, do you see, if this continues to get larger and larger, could it have a very beneficial impact on the world?
I want to step back, and I want to say something that one of my readings that I think is really important. Okay. So the mysteries, Greek had a renaissance, starting, with some philosophy and then ending up with Alexander the Great pretty much conquering up most of the world.
Yeah.
At that time. So that was about a 300-year period where we see famous names like, Plato, Aristotle, Socrates, Archimedes, Pythagoras, Euclid. The list is incredible what happened in those 300 years, right? Well, when we look at that, there was a real problem going on in Greece from a religious perspective. See, religion in that day was state run. Every city-state had a religious institution. When someone like Alexander the Great keeps conquering city-state after city-state after city-state, and they're all different, right? Then you start running into a really, really big problem is, what's the relevant religion?
Yeah.
So what was happening is, in the days of Plato and Socrates, is religion was coming out of favor. People were not feeling that the religion that was being taught to them was relevant anymore. And so when I read that was going on, 2,000 years ago or 2,500 years ago, I go, wait a second, that's exactly how I feel today. I feel that so many people feel that the religion that is being presented to us, it's culture. It creates culture. It's not moving us. And then what you saw was a critique from Plato, where Plato also attacked the rise of the superstition, the superstitio. So the religio, or the state religion, was declining, but there was all of these charlatans and superstitious people that were increasing. So the one decline gave rise to the other. And Plato had a real problem with this. He had a problem with the fact that all of these peddlers and snake oilsmen were peddling all these different forms of religious practices. And you can see the same type of critique in Nietzsche. You can see the same type of critique, I think, here in Austin. We see all of these self-help, self-appointed, self-certified gurus coming up, and shamans. And what you're seeing is a thriving business model, but you're not having, a real discovery of the knowledge with a capital K.
Yep.
And so the noetic sense of it is not there. The thing that this was realer than real. And easily manipulated. And so what happened in Eleusis, for some reason, Plato goes to Eleusis as an initiate and comes back and has the idea of the shadows in the cave, that there is a real world out there and that all that we typically see is the cave. And that concept, that there was something real at the mysteries, and that this something that was real was the biggest gift that Athens ever bestowed upon the world. Whoa.
Yeah.
And it wasn't within the realm of religion, and it wasn't within the realm of superstition. It was somewhere in the middle there. And I think that's why it lasted 2,400 years.
Yeah.
Because it tapped into something real, but it wasn't something that you did every weekend. it was deeply meaning making. And think about this, deeply meaning making. I mean, what do, you know, what do Pythagoras, Jimi Hendrix,
Hmm.
the Beatles, Steve Jobs, and um, Crick that discovered DNA and won the Nobel Prize, what do all of those people have in common?
Well, it's completely revolutionary on a lot of different fronts. And yeah, I mean, like you said, meaning making, you know.
LSD. LSD.
Well, yeah, so it
L-
doesn't surprise me that that thread kind of goes through that whole thing there. And yeah, because
absolute,
these
absolute.
substances
Silicon
have.
Valley. So if Greek had a scientific renaissance that gave us things, not only tragedy and comedy, but, philosophy. I mean, Archimedes went to the mysteries. Well, he discovered buoyancy that they needed for their boats to float and conquer the world.
Mhm,
Well, that's science. Those are scientific revolutions that
mhm,
come out of this mystery cult,
mhm.
right? And look at where when LSD hit Silicon Valley, it created an entire scientific revolution that we're still, grappling with, and it's
Mhm.
ongoing. And so thinking about that, the height of Greek culture was interlaced literally with LSD, and it was literally gave us some of the best thinking. I mean, not only we're talking like the theological and the philosophical stuff. I mean, democracy, Senate, republic,
Yeah.
mathematics, science, all of these things had this fertile ground. I
Mhm,
mean, in my mind, Pythagoras saw, divine triangles in the medicine space,
mhm.
just at the same way that Plato discovered the shadows in the cave. And just at the same time that women codified the principles of pharmacology,
Mhm.
pharmacia, pharmacon. All of this happened today, and they're the bedrock of Western civilization. And
Yep.
this is probably, I think, one of the things that was so interesting. I had a conversation with a medicine lady here, and she serves ayahuasca, she serves other stuff right here at ATMA. And she said she never considered serving LSD as a sacrament.
Yeah.
And she said the reason is she says there's no lineage behind it. It was
Yeah,
grown,
man, I get
it was grown in a lab.
yeah.
And then after she came to my info session, she said, "You made me realize that there is a lineage there." And I said,
Yes.
"Yes, there is a lineage there. And it's not a lineage in Peru or Costa Rica or Native American. We're not, this is our lineage. If you went to a Western school, no matter what your skin color is or your
Mhm,
heritage, but if you were brought up with the
mhm,
concept of democracy,
mhm.
right? This is part of your lineage. These
Yep.
are the stories that you've had. And I think this is probably the most exciting thing about the Eleusinian Mysteries
Yep.
is, can we tap back into our Western lineage? Not only can we reenact the mysteries, but can we really come in? And I had a recent message chat with Jamie Wheel about, the mysteries could be part of a scientific revolution. And he basically confirmed it to me and says, yes, you could probably create an entire Pythagorean academy alongside a mystery tradition and invite different scientists from different fields. So when Francis Crick did an acid trip and saw the double helix
Mhm.
that described to him what he was observing in his laboratory. And then he went back to his laboratory and confirmed what he had seen within a trance like state. Can you imagine the amount of divination or scientific revolution that can come out of a ritual
Yep.
practice that is not woo, but actually deeply
Yep.
scientific and wrestles with
Yep.
the makeup of mind or consciousness in our cosmos?
Yeah.
That is very exciting. And it's
Yeah.
ours.
And I'll tell you what too is that, the way I kind of see it is that a lot of the reason why we're in the pickle we are today, specifically with the environment, is that we kind of separated science and medicine with kind of the spiritual religious practice, right? And then, as we're looking for man to help us heal and not nature, that kind of defines our relationship with nature. But I see this and a lot of these other plant medicines and ceremonies inviting that back, right? Inviting that back into the consciousness where we realize that our division with nature isn't this, you know what I mean? And so that's one hope I have for all the ceremonies, really. But I do think that this has, again, because science and technology is going to help us, be better with nature, right? Thinking along those directions, more renewable energy sources, things of that nature.
Yeah, and if you go into Brian Muraresku's book, you'll see a
Mhm.
big underlying with our relationship with nature. But he also points at two other aspects that
Mhm.
we've, specifically from a religious aspect, that we've persecuted.
Mhm.
See, something grew Christianity like wildfire. When Christianity was illegal, okay, it was growing underground like wildfire, and it
Mhm.
was in his book. It was led by women and
Yes.
drugs.
Yes. Yeah.
And then what has happened is we've persecuted women and
Yep.
drugs.
That's right.
We've done those two things from the war on drugs was started by the Catholic Church, period.
Yeah.
Okay? And we've been prosecuting women and drugs since the second century, pretty
Yeah.
much,
Yep.
and definitely by the fourth century. And so when we start looking at that equation, not only do we need to restore our relationship
Mhm.
with the natural world,
Mhm.
not only do we have to restore our relationship with drugs in that regard,
Mhm. Yep.
I also think that there is a third aspect that is coming on really strong at our church here is that
Mhm.
we need to restore a relationship with the feminine.
Oh, I
And
couldn't agree more.
therefore,
I couldn't.
and therefore, what it was wonderful in one of our last conversations. We had some really powerful women sitting there, and it was a small group. And they're speaking in the plural, not I as a woman, but we as women have
Mhm.
been persecuted and burned for being intuitive, enriched with information and love and feeling. And when we start looking at that, I really wanted to put up front is yes, this Eleusinian mystery revival,
Mhm.
it's a passion project that ignited me when I read Brian Muraresku's book.
Yep.
And I wanted to do it, and I start talking about it, and I can't shut up. But there's a point on the fall equinox, by that point, that I, as a man, as a non castrated man, will
Yeah.
have to butt out. And
Yeah.
this is no longer my mystery.
Yeah.
And so for me, that is a really important point is I want to hand like the Olympic flame is I'm holding a torch right now, but that torch is really tiny.
Yeah.
But it's something that's bridging 2,000 years
Mhm.
of cycle.
Mhm.
If I can now pass that on to a group of hierophants,
Mhm.
priestesses, women, they're going to set this ablaze.
Absolutely.
And so that is, I think, those are the three relationships that we need to restore
Yep.
in a deep
Yep.
ritualistic practice: our relationship to nature, our relationship to drugs, and our relationship to women. And I believe that that type of safe container is going
Mhm.
to allow for something to come that is real, that is not superstitious. And because there's no man in charge, and I already feel as a man,
Yeah.
people are really interested in this. I feel that adoration. I feel that wanting to pull it towards me. And
Yeah.
I go, no, 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 this
Yep.
is not correct. And so if you then look at Jamie Wheel's book, right, Recapture the Rapture, how do we build a non-culty cult, right?
Yeah.
How do we
That's the
how do we
challenge,
do
huh?
that? And I think the secret ingredient is to let women take charge, not one woman, but a collection of women that have ever since there were little girls went in group and kept each other safe,
Hmm.
right? If the women can create a safe space for women, they can then create a safe space for all
Yep.
of us.
Yep.
And the risk of it becoming a cult, where we're literally, fearing, fighting,
Mhm.
fucking, those are some of the terminology that James
Yeah.
Wheel used.
Yeah.
It, you see that around men, but
Yeah.
you don't see that around
That's right.
women.
That's right.
And I really think we need to restore that.
Yeah, and just an observation, I've been working with a lot of people who set up entheogenic churches, as you're well aware. The women by far are more successful. And one thing I've noticed, they're just so good at building community. And, within that community, people get a lot of the stuff that I think they're missing now, really just connection with another human being, but I have noticed that women are at the absolute best at doing it. And I have no doubt that these mysteries, that they're going to run with it, and it's going to become very special. I feel.
It, it, I am so shocked about the realness of it already, and we haven't even done anything
Hmm.
except say, let's do something that is not a concert and it's not a self-help journey.
Hmm.
Let's do something that really, really could be divine.
Hmm.
And I think the key to that divinity is restoring women because the number one thing people need when they start looking into, experimenting with the medicine space and the sacredness that can be found within the medicine space is they need to know that they're safe.
Yeah.
They need to know that they're not joining a cult, that the next Manson family is not going to go on a
Yeah.
killing rampage.
Yeah.
And, and so there's a fine line there that we don't have the verbiage. And so I think having traditions, and we need a new lexicon because we
Yeah.
can't call a collection of women that is practicing magic a coven. There's
Yeah.
just so much negative connotation around that we need new words and to prove that these are safe environments. And I think it's going to happen, but it's going to take time.
Yeah. Well, man, Robert, I appreciate you coming on. If you want to, just let people know, and I'll drop links in the description how to get a hold of you. But if you just want to give everybody some general knowledge of the timeline moving forward, and I do realize that we're kind of coming up on it, but kind of like your information session, and then kind of where, if someone's to attend that, what's the process kind of from there?
So the most public is obviously our Instagram
Okay.
account
Okay.
at ATMA Church,
Okay.
ATMA ATMA. Also, we have a Telegram group that you can join once we've kind of vetted you a little bit. So
Mm-hmm.
message us.
Mm-hmm.
And then after that, just a little bit of a timeline is I'm having two more info sessions before the end of August,
Okay.
one next week and then the week after.
Okay.
Again, all of that will be released on the Instagram account.
Okay.
There's also Altima Church on Facebook. But the other part is that really uh, the priestess component of this is going to come together before the end of August, where we're
Okay.
really going to see some type of inspiration from these deities,
Yep.
what is left of them. No idea if after 2,000 years of worship, if we're plugging into an 8,000 volt circuit or an 80-volt circuit.
Yeah.
But I have a feeling that this could become very, very big
Mm-hmm.
as long as we keep it safe
That's
and we
right.
keep it real and it doesn't become a party or an orgy.
Absolutely. Yeah.
It really is something deeply revelatory. And so yeah, the Instagram, the basically the Telegram, get in that as soon as you can after you message us on
Okay.
Instagram.
Okay.
And if you're in Austin, come to my event. And the events will also be zoomed so that you could attend, but you'll have to sign up prior to that to get
Okay.
the Zoom.
Cool. Well, yeah, man, I appreciate it. And, for sure, obviously, after we have this first event coming up, I'd love to have you back on to discuss how it went, and some thoughts moving forward. As you know, this entheogen religion, spirituality thing is my academic interest. So, tracking your progress through this and really helping get the word out will be a priority to me. So, thank you for coming on today, and we look
Well,
forward to having you in the future, man.
well, thank you very much. And you and your wife have an open invite to come and join us here. So that'd be wonderful.
Well,
Okay.
I will contact you about that. I appreciate it, Robert.